Welcome back to the Partner Podcast. Today we've got a special guest. His name is Michael Bronfman. He's the COO of Baresop. Hey, Michael. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Hey, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. How
No
things?
problem. Good, mate. Good. Mate, we've had the pleasure of working with you and Baresop. I think you're one of the longest brands on the platform.
Yeah, firstly, it's been a pleasure working with you guys. I mean, the hustle's real with you, and seeing you go from where you started to where you guys are now is pretty incredible. I always, sort of believed the business that you guys are in. I think partnerships for us in particular and throughout my journey in business has always been front of mind and it's supported the growth more specifically. And so creating a structure that allows you to partner with brands in a more scalable way has been absolutely phenomenal, for me in particular and our business. So, mate, when I see something good, I jump on it.
I appreciate it, mate. That's awesome. Now I know you've done some pretty amazing things in your career so far, but which we'll touch on. But let's maybe focus and hone in on Baresop for the minute. Let's start with maybe what is Baresop? What do you guys do?
Sure. So firstly, a lot of people pronounce this incorrectly. It's actually Baresop.
Oh, sorry, mate.
No, that's all
Baresop.
right. Majority of people get it wrong, so that's all good. So Baresop, essentially, first thing first, we're on a mission to eliminate 1 billion plastic bottles by 2035, which will equate to 50,000 tonne of carbon emission, which will be eliminated from the planet, and 600,000 litres of water, which we're looking to essentially divert into communities that need clean drinking water. How we're able to do that is through our innovative personal care products. So ultimately, we've got personal care products like hand wash, body wash, and are launching other products within the personal care market. And what we've done is we've been able to take out the water component out of the product, which essentially is 90% of a hand wash or a body wash product, to then come up with the raw ingredients and crystallize the raw ingredients into a powder formulation that allows that powder to turn from powder to foam. And we've patented that technology. And so ultimately you buy the bottle once and you get the sachet with the powder. You fill up the bottle with water from your sink. The idea is that you keep the bottle forever, and then you just buy these sachets, which are the powder form, every 3 months or so, either on a subscription or you buy it as you go. And ultimately it's a full circle economy whereby our sachets are compostable, which means you can throw them in your garden and they basically disintegrate within 3 months, which is pretty cool. And so you're never sort of disposing of any plastic, which is the interesting part.
Oh, that's awesome. Great mission.
Yeah,
and when did you guys start? So Prishka started the company.
Yeah, so Priska founded the business around October 2020. And that is, as you know, during COVID, out of a conversation that she started with her daughter about the South Pacific patch and the problem around the plastic issue. And so what they did was they went through this discovery phase of essentially replacing personal care products in their own household and just more specifically becoming a more sustainable household. When it came to the kitchen, they didn't have any issues, but when it came to the bathroom, it was very difficult to find any products. And so they actually founded a product whereby you'd actually purchase a product, you'd use the product, and then you'd have to go to the post office, ship out the product, and then get it back. And it was just too fragmented and too painful to go through the process as much as they wanted to be a sustainable household. So that's when Baresop came into inception, and they took ownership in the narrative of the personal care market by creating this solution. And so business went through the Monash Accelerator program, which essentially allowed Priska to validate the product with over 200 users. Then went into the StartMate Accelerator program, which was funded by StartMate. And then 18 months later is when Priska and I joined forces, as she's sort of product specific. I'm more commercial. So I came on as a major shareholder of this business and chief commercial officer to be able to commercialize the business. And so I've been within the business for about 1.5 years now, or just under 1.5 years. to sort of move the business in the right direction. And it's been, as you can see, it's been a great journey for us, an
Yeah,
interesting one.
awesome. No, that's very interesting. So can you give us an indication of the size of the company now, like head count?
Yeah, so we've got about 6 or so people on board, and we've specifically tried to run as lean as possible. Just so that, as you know, I mean, we're in a very interesting financial market at the moment. And so rather than having to get rid of people, which we really, really didn't want to do, we wanted to scale in a way that everyone takes on more responsibility. However, we don't
Nice.
have to get rid of more people. So that's worked in our favor. It's also allowed us to scale in a way that is more profitable, which I think was important. So when I first came into the business, the first thing we did was change manufacturers, as the microeconomics didn't quite stack up at that point. So once we did that, then we were able to sort of go and create some large partnerships to be able to scale the business. And so in terms of size, look at about 6 people. We're currently doing our pre-Series A round, raising $1.5 million. You would have seen recently we've signed on a strategic partnership, which came on, sort of as an investor, and we can talk more about that partnership in particular. And so, yeah, for us to be able to sprint towards our mission in a much faster rate, we need to be able to, be capital intensive and go from there. But we're very fortunate that we've been able to sort of get the business to a point where it's quite profitable, which is exciting.
That's definitely handy. Definitely helps,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
it does. Yeah.
So what will that, so let's say the 1.5 million, what will that allow or mean for you guys?
Sure. So, first thing first, the strategic partnerships around the retail sector, obviously amplifying those. So, when the business was first established, D2C was the predominant channel
Channel.
that we were selling on. And then we looked at how do we diversify in a way that allows us to get brand out there at a larger scale and get to our mission of 1 billion plastic bottles. And that is through going through a discovery phase of understanding our customers are shopping online and where they're shopping offline. And so what we've discovered is that they're predominantly shopping in health food stores and pharmacy stores. And so basically we've closed a couple of strategic deals. Firstly, in the health food store channel, where we essentially have completed 6 or so distribution deals in each different states in Australia that will see us across about 6,000 doors over the next 24 months or across health food. And then post that is our deal across pharmacy, where we essentially started having a conversation with a company called Elite Sales, and they're one of Australia's largest distributors in the pharmacy space. So they've got about 27 sales staff on the ground. And so when we're talking about running the business lean, obviously the Elite Sales allowed us to go, okay, well, if we can employ those 27 people, which would essentially cost us about $4 million in wages, and do it in a way that doesn't cost us anything necessarily, but also catapults our growth, it makes strategic sense. And so what we actually did was we ended up doing a deal where they ended up investing in our business as part of their services. So they've got an equity stake in our business, and we've tied them into KPIs. So that business alone will see us across about 6,000 pharmacy doors in the next 24 months, which is pretty cool. So you can really see how we're trying to sort of run lean, but then maximize the output as much as possible. So yeah, in terms of the $1.5 million, to answer your question, if we spent those funds, probably about 30 to 50% of that into the B2B channel, then we'll be able to increase our revenue, but our profit as well, by almost 3x, right? Just on those organic channels. And so that's one of the objectives. And then obviously we've got things like product development, extra headcount because we do need more people. And yeah, that sort of covers growth would be predominant, probably 50 to sort of 70%, and the rest would be product development and, building out the community.
Yeah. And you got to buy product too, right? You got to make it, sell
You
it.
need to buy product. Yeah, that's right. Luckily, there's solutions out there for that, which is good. But product. That's again going to your point is my background's predominantly tech, right? And so, as you know, in tech, you don't buy product, right? You buy people and developers, right?
Yeah.
And you don't move developers around, like they stay in office, right? Whereas
Yeah.
here you're moving product around and there's logistic issues and
Mm.
so all those things you have to sort of work through
See,
and,
it feels like we've kind of done a swap because I've come from product background, ecom, and now I'm in
yeah,
tech. And I'm like, how
yeah,
good's this? You don't have to buy any products. You're not, it's not sitting in the warehouse somewhere. But
yeah,
as you know, there's lots of other issues and teething problems that come with tech as well. So
yeah,
there's no easy solution out there in business.
100%.
It's always hard work. So that really good strategy, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to the B2B strategy? It's obviously going to really feed into B2C and it's going to really help drive awareness. Is that the long-term play?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the overall mission of eliminating such large quantities of plastic in a pretty short period of time, when you think about it, I mean, there's no way to do it by just trading online, right? So we need more people, more traffic, and obviously that's great on a national scale, but Australia is a very small market. So
Yeah.
we're also exploring international markets as we speak, which is pretty exciting. Because without the international market, we won't be able to, sort of get to that mission. But the strategy is absolutely to first thing first during these downturn markets to diversify. I think that's very important. But also number two is just to increase the volume and the sort of, be able to sort of, sprint towards our mission rather than sort of get there in a slower way. And, we're trying to do that with taking least amount of risk whilst
Mm,
maximizing and sort of, squeezing the juice out of the lemon, if that makes sense.
100%. So, yeah, that's really interesting. So you being a CEO, mate, what's a day in the life of a CEO mean? What do you do?
Yeah. So as a CCO, as you could imagine, I look
CCO.
after. Yeah, CCO. I know everyone gets that wrong. I don't know why. I'm actually terrible at operations, so I'd be a terrible COO, by the
So
way.
what does CCO stand for?
Chief Commercial Officer.
Chief
So,
Commercial.
um, I mean, it's just a title at the end of the day. It
Yeah.
could be Chief Revenue, could be anything. But as a startup, you wear multiple hats. We know this. I guess in terms of what does a day look like, it's all about first thing first is does everything we do. Obviously, we've got a mission, and like we're led by that mission. But is what we're doing not only led by that mission, but does it make commercial sense, right? And so I look at number one. I look at the strategy. I look at the numbers. I set the sort of turnaround profitability, microeconomics, all this sort of numbers orientated data, but also cutting through all the deals, right? So all the deals that we've done recently, I've sort of executed on, and then ultimately, creating deals that are not only, exciting, but also beneficial and make a lot of sense and a win-win for both parties, right? And so that's probably where my strength really lays, I'd say, and on the numbers and making sure that we're propelling forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys, as you said, you were founded in 2020.
Yeah.
I believe there's just really the 1 to 2 core products. Is that right?
Yeah. At the moment, there's two core products with multiple different scentings. So we can play with the scents, obviously,
Nice.
because as you know, personal care products are very much dependent on scents. So reason why we stuck to the core product is because we wanted to get them right and we wanted to make sure that we can push them enough to be able to warrant then not only growing but growing horizontally in a way that we introduced the way we introduce products is we introduce products for the customer by the customer. So as an
Mm,
example, when we go into pharmacy and they ask for a specific product, we work with them on that product to make sure there's a product market fit before we actually just go and spend money on product development before we know it's going to stick.
yeah.
And so we've been very strategic in that approach. So you can really see how we can go into that customer and then ultimately develop the product range with that customer
Yeah.
and get purchase orders before we even produce the product, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Totally. That's good.
So that's sort of the strategy.
Mm.
Yeah.
I made a previous mistake with one of my e-commerce companies, which was doing really, really well at the times, and I
Yeah.
got excited,
Yeah.
as lots of I guess founders do, and decided to go and just create more products. And I
Yeah.
had the one core product, which was a journal, and it was
Yeah.
selling like hotcakes. And
Yeah.
I just lost focus and got too excited and made all these other products that I thought was an extension of the business and why people were coming.
Yeah.
And I spent so much money in product development and stock, and it
Mm.
really hurt me at the time.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
took a bit to kind of regain that focus
Yeah.
and go back to the core.
Yeah. And I'm sure you would have learnt a lot of lessons. Like we as entrepreneurs, you learn lessons along the way and along the journey, and unfortunately, they cost you money and time. But ultimately, if you were to do that again, right, you'd probably do a customer discovery and ask the customer what they want before we launch it, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think, yeah, everything happens for a reason. Like we can cry over spilt milk, but I think all that is a learning for you moving forward.
yeah.
I mean, I had a startup I sold when I was 23, and I mean, that startup should have sold for $200 million, but it sold for peanuts, right? So, and that's because we partnered with the wrong business partners at the time. And so you learn through those experiences, and through challenges and through adversity, if that makes sense, which is good. Good learning curve.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Where do you think you've learnt the most? Like we mentioned, you've had lots of different experiences and roles, and you're an advisor. You've sold
yeah,
companies. Where do you think you've learnt the most? What kind of roles?
yeah. I definitely think I stumbled across a business when I was about 23 called OpenPay. And the way I stumbled across that, I had a contact out of Israel, which was a CEO of a 50,000 employee company out of Israel. And it was a close contact of mine. And I sort of, when I heard he was coming to Australia, I approached him about bringing medical device. I was looking to start a new company, bringing medical devices out of Israel and starting a distribution company. One thing led to another. He didn't have the network, but he was telling me about this, idea and concept of a reverse lay-by solution where one of the founding members of that team is basically gone to Israel, and they've been doing it for 15 years, and they had a big retail chain in Australia that they wanted to trial it in, basically. And so one thing led to another. I ended up presenting what I see the opportunity, and ended up joining that business like super early on as sort of like fifth employee. And I mean, that business we scaled to about 250 employees in 2 years. We IPO'd the business, launched into the US, into the UK. At its peak, it was worth, $946 million, close to a unicorn, which is pretty cool. So as you could appreciate, when you're hiring 10 people a week, and you're sort of going from zero to hero in 2 years, it's pretty crazy, right? So,
Mm,
I think to your point around, earlier on the conversation we had around the challenges and doubling down on your challenges, I see too many startups, they're sort of focusing on what's going really well in the business, and sort of 80% of their attention is on that. And one thing I've learned really well in the past from pretty influential business people that were involved in that business is that, we focus 90% of our attention on stuff that's going wrong in the business and
mm.
10% of what's going well, and you'll do well. And we did exactly that. And yeah, obviously had a very strict strategy, execute on the strategy, pivoted, and it worked really well.
Ties into
So
that book. Only the paranoid survive, right?
yeah, that's it. I haven't read that book actually. So I'm going to look into it. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of lessons to take out of that, right?
Can't claim that I've read it, mate, but Ryan has, and he tells me all about it.
I'm going to have to read it then. In that case, Ryan loves his books, doesn't he?
Oh, he loves his books, mate. Don't get him started.
That's good. Yeah, so I
um,
think OpenPay was sort of like where I picked up a lot of my learnings, and then I started doing like advisory work to a lot of high net worth families, and sort of seeing how they think and how they do things with, you know, unlimited cash, if that makes sense, like a lot of money
yeah,
behind them.
yeah,
But still the way they set out their, business fundamentals regardless of how much money you have.
Do you think having that much cash, obviously, you get different opportunities, but it allows you to think bigger?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, they would have started with no cash, right? And over the years, over a 40-year period, they've sort of built their nest egg, and have been able to do some great things. And they all went through the same challenges that, entrepreneurs talk about. It's when your back's against the wall is really when you start sort of shining,
Yeah.
And I think you have to go through that process to be able to, propel forward. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Nothing beats experience, right?
what's that? Yeah, nothing
Nothing
beats.
beats. I think
Yeah,
there's like in certain times there's things that you're stressing about,
yeah,
but you don't know that they're not a big deal until
yeah,
you've gone through it before. And next time it
exactly,
happens, you're like, "There's nothing to worry about. It doesn't matter." And then you
exactly.
allow yourself to move faster. And
Yeah.
whereas like doing it for the first time or second time, you're worrying about a lot of things that doesn't matter.
The anxiety, the sleepless nights, hey?
There's been a few.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, to answer your question, do they think bigger? Yeah. Obviously, like for them, if they did a development, for example, of, 20 units, that's too small, right? Or
Mm.
200 units, or, they always go bigger and bigger majority of the time, right? But
I
they
heard
have
a quote this morning of someone,
yeah,
I think Adam Robinson, I've been following him a little bit, he's from retention.com.
yeah,
And it's true when you look at people perhaps owning like a takeaway store. They work
yeah,
just as hard as you and I, if not bloody harder. But it takes just as much effort to go big than it does to go small.
it's true. Yeah, yeah, it's very true. And I had this conversation with a pretty high net worth individual recently, and they were telling me, if you're doing $1 million deal or whether you're doing $100 million deal, right? It's actually easier to do the $100 million deals than the $1 million deals because they're actually good businesses, right? So,
True.
yeah, and it's like the same process and same amount of effort and all that kind of stuff. So, from my perspective and to Adam's point, right? It's like, while when you go the bigger way, if you can, obviously you've just got to make sure it's calculated and you've got to make sure that, you don't risk everything, if that makes sense. But yeah, it just takes as much effort, like you said, right? So why
Yeah,
not have a crack?
for
Yeah.
sure. Now, you've dropped the phrase strategic partnerships quite a few times since we started talking.
Yeah.
Can you think back to when you first fell in love with partnerships and why? Like, what was the point where you put something together and go, oh shit, this is
Yeah.
something here?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good question. I definitely think Open Bay days was very interesting because what we did was, as part of the strategy, we defined 4 key verticals that we were going to go after. So again, we were very focused, right? And part of the strategy was to look at each vertical and basically define the top 10 accounts in those verticals, right? And we recognize that those accounts might be 3 to 12 month deal cycle, right? Because they're enterprise deals. So in healthcare, we had Bupa and Medibank, for example. In home improvement, we had Bunnings, retail Nike, so forth and so on. The second element to that was channel partners, right? So what we did was we defined 3 key channel partners that allow us to go in from one out to many. And that's what I love about partnerships, right? Is how do we go in from one out to many, which allows you to basically scale in the leanest, quickest way possible, right? And so, as an early stage company, you don't necessarily have the funding or the deep pockets that some of the larger brands, right? Or you don't necessarily have the brand credibility or recognition to build enough trust to be able to get your brand out there, right? So, how do you do it strategically? And that's through partnerships, right? So, as an example, if I do a deal with Bupa and my logo is with Bupa, right? People start looking at that and there's credibility there, right? Or if I do a deal with like an elite to sales where essentially we've got 27 sales staff selling our product every day to pharmacy doors, and you might potentially, obviously, you pay for that service, right? Or whatever, but not having to employ and worry about whether employing the right people, etc., at $4 million salaries a year, and doing it a lot more strategically, and they know the market and have been in the market and are the best in the market, allows us and gives us confidence to be able to do that, right? Obviously, when it comes to partnerships, it's got to be mutually beneficial, right? So it needs to bring some value to the partner and vice versa. So it's always, as you know, a win-win sort of situation. But what I think, I guess, scalability is the most important thing when we're looking at partnerships, and credibility, and then being able to leverage, big brands, funding, and so forth and so on. What I really like specifically about what you guys have been able to achieve at Partner is making it more sort of brand collaborative, right? So you can literally, by click of a button, initiate a partnership without even knowing that person. So me having to knock on doors, not knowing, so let's say you don't have the network, right? Some of us are fortunate enough to have the networks, right? But those that don't, and even if you do, right, it allows you to open a door without necessarily needing to know the person. And not only that, it allows you to do the partnership and initiate the partnership in, let's call it, a week rather than a year. And so that's where the value lays. And so, for me, as soon as I saw the product and I spoke to you guys in particular, it was like, okay, well, this is just a no-brainer. And for me, partnerships are super important. So, 1 and 1 equals 2, hey?
Speaks your language.
Exactly.
What are an example of one of the most recent partnerships on that kind of company to company level that Baresop has put together?
The one you guys have helped with immensely was the HelloFresh one. Obviously, that's like, for us to get into HelloFresh directly would potentially take a while, even though we share an office with them, by the way, in Melbourne.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
I think they share an office with a lot of people. There's a lot of offices they're in.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. So, that one there was initiated within a couple of weeks. It was an awesome collaboration. And then, I think also giving a bit the ability for more smaller brands to do stuff together, I know for us at Baresop in particular, when it comes to the online channel, collaborations and gifting and things like that work really well, especially with brands that really align. And so it allows you to also think outside the box and do a deal with, what does a personal care product have to do with a fintech product? But there's a lot of value alignments and a lot of potential to be able to really look at a customer holistically and give them the most amount of value in partnership. And so obviously that element allowed us to do a lot of things with you guys.
Yeah, Baresop's definitely in a really cool position, as you guys have such a wide and varied customer base with some really strong core values of sustainability. I think that really, it opens you guys up to so many different opportunities and so many different verticals and brands that you can work with, for sure.
I think it helps because,
you go,
I was just going to say, Jamie, it helps considering the the global strategy, but also companies sort of moving towards, sustainability. And so if it's in your core or at your core of your business and that's what you're led by, there's no reason people wouldn't want to partner with us,
Yeah, for sure. And what type of, it doesn't have to be with Baresop, can be in your career, what kind of ROIs have you experienced with partnerships?
Oh, shit. Okay. Obviously, the Bupa deal would have been about a $20 million deal. That sort of, yes, it cost us in labor and everything, but it wasn't crazy. Then, when we look at, I've done a deal with pretty large sort of distribution company in the medical sector in the past. That would have been probably, $50 million deal over a 5-year period, which is pretty crazy. When it comes to Baresop, at the moment, it's more of a smaller scale compared to what I've done in the past. However, for a small business, it's moving us in the right direction to become a bigger company and a corporation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've done some pretty substantial deals in terms of partnerships in particular. Yeah, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah, awesome. So what's the future going to look like for Baresop? Where are you guys headed?
Yeah, so obviously we want to share the love a lot more with people, and we want to build a bigger community. And like I mentioned, we want to be able to do more good in the world at a faster rate. And so part of that journey, will see us across other regions, obviously across other products. Really focus on, looking at the customer, understanding the customer in depth and what they need when it comes to sustainability, and how can we, tailor that solution for them to then be able to, share with more households essentially. And so, yeah, sort of the distribution deals we're doing at the moment are across multiple different channels, which obviously gives us exposure to bigger and larger, um, distribution capacities, which has been good. And then the international market component, which ultimately allows us to really sort of, enter international markets to be able to share and contribute and impact a lot more.
What's helping you kind of make those decisions in what areas, like let's say the US or the UK? How are
Mm,
you guys coming up or hypothesizing of where to go or focus on next? Is it
mm.
through the D2C orders online? Go, oh, we've got a bit of attention here, or is it more the strategic partnerships you can put together?
Yeah. Yeah, the D2C component helps because you see where people are wanting demand, but also having an understanding of each market, and what they look for and where the biggest problems lay, right? So, like
Mm,
plastic issues in Asia, for example, is huge,
mm,
right? But then at the same time, having experience in launching into international markets, right? Usually from Australia, you usually go to the UK because it's sort of, as you know, an English speaking country, and legislation is somewhat similar. It's double the market, not 10x the market. And then you sort of follow on to the US.
yeah.
Um, in this instance, we've got opportunities in bigger markets, So I think it just comes down to like, how do you, again, comes back to strategic deals whereby your risk component is, your downside is not as great as obviously as your upside, right? So having a
Yep.
greater upside than your downside and just exploring deal by deal basis, basically. I mean, we've had instances where we're introduced to sort of international partners both in Asia, and luckily we did our due diligence and we sort of didn't move ahead. So I think just importantly, really just understanding why we're doing what we're doing and
Mm.
what is the outcome of that, yeah, of that
It's
deal,
okay to
basically.
say no to certain opportunities at
Oh,
times.
I always say it's not the deals that you do that make you; it's the deals that you don't do that don't break you. Basically,
That's a good point. Yeah, for sure.
Um, so yeah, just being mindful. Like I used to, as when I was in my 20s and I ran companies, I used to get excited by everything I see. Now I'm sort of a bit more cautious, and I've learned with experience to go, okay, well, what's wrong with this? When something's
Yeah.
too like, what's
Turn into
happening here?
cranky old men. Now, what do they
Exactly.
want? Can't
Yeah.
be that good.
Yeah. Exactly. So
Well,
yeah, no, it's been
what
good.
do you like to do outside of work, mate? Do you have a life outside of work?
I don't know. Startup founders, like, well,
Not really.
you don't really have life, right? Outside of work. But look, I've got a young family, so I try and allocate sort of 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. to spend time with the kids and the family. I sort of go for runs every morning. I'll go to the gym nice and early just to get the day started. So I really enjoy that process as much as people can't get up and do that. Like I
Mm,
really enjoy that process, and
yeah.
have enjoyed for a long time. Um, Catching up with friends every now and then, which I don't get enough to do of, and that's purely because as you know, it's like time's money almost, as bad as that sounds, but it's like you've just got to focus on what's going to move, and propel you forward. Um, so yeah, nothing too exciting, mate. Like I can't say I surf or play golf. I mean, golf every now and then with sort of advisors, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty much keep fit and healthy, spend time with the family as much as possible, and yeah, just like sort of see the impact that I'm having, in business, also my kids, which is pretty cool. Like I'll take my 5-year-old into meetings and stuff, get him to learn a little bit, which is pretty
Cool.
good.
Cool. I think I feel people get a bit too stuck on work-life balance. And I feel like perhaps those are the people that don't really love what they do. And
Yeah,
it makes them feel a little bit better by saying, "Oh, you got to have a balanced life." Whereas I
yeah,
know it's not always the best thing to do, but I love doing
yeah,
what I do. And
yeah,
my family has to sacrifice sometimes, which is not the best, but it's going to
yeah.
pay off, hopefully.
That's the plan. Exactly.
I've
Exactly.
definitely, the last 8 weeks, though, about 9 weeks, I've committed. My best mate has just opened a gym, like one of
Yeah,
those, not CrossFit, but HIIT kind
yeah,
of training gyms.
yeah,
And he said, mate, give me 8 weeks of your full commitment, come every
yeah.
day. So I've been doing that for 4:30 in the morning. I've been waking up, and I honestly feel like a different human.
It's good,
Like
right?
it's
Yeah,
affected my personal life and
yeah,
business. It's been incredible.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
hopefully I won't go back to being a slob.
yeah. No, exactly. But no, I'm sure you won't. I mean, as long as you're enjoying the journey and, like you said, you
Yeah,
love what you do, I think that's the key takeaways. Like you just got to make sure you enjoy the journey.
yeah, for sure. All right, man. I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. Thanks so much for your
Awesome.
time. I think
Thanks for having me.
there's a lot of takeaways there.
For
We'll
sure. Thanks for
see
having
you
me. It's been
soon.
a pleasure. Yeah, definitely. Thanks, John.
See you, mate.